In Japan, I don't think it ever really went away or died like it did in the United States. It went on hiatus for a while. When Godzilla 85 came out, it kind of helped boost the interest in Godzilla, and then when Godzilla vs. Biollante came out in 1989, I think that really brought Godzilla back into the Japanese public's eye. In the United States, again, I don't think it ever really died, but after films like Godzilla vs. Megalon and then the disappointment in Godzilla 1985, I think it became less mainstream and more like you have a lot of cult classics. And it's only because, not even so much of G-Fan, but because of the most recent films getting into this country one way or the other, of course they have not, never will be officially released here, that fans are beginning to discover that, you know, they have been making Godzilla films of a higher quality than what we were used to in the 70s, and that there are small little fan networks out there of people who thought they were isolated and, oh, I must be the only one who likes Godzilla, now discover there's a bunch of them. And I believe G-Fan, I don't want to say G-Fan was responsible for that, but G-Fan is definitely a result of that resurgence. I think it goes back to the fact that most of us, when we first got into Godzilla, whether it was on the 4:30 movie in New York City or in the, you know, the morning matinee in the theaters, enjoyed it as a kid. And the same reason Batman or Superman or any of the cult classics over the years has survived, you take the things you really enjoyed from childhood and you bring them with you as you get older. In Japan, and of course then from Japan it came here, there has been within the last 10, 15 years a big influx in the production and import of Godzilla toys. And hey, you know, now you got all these adults out here, we're all out there working 9-to-5 jobs and making money, and all of a sudden we have this whole well of toys to buy. I mean, it just feeds on itself. You know, it's why is James Bond lasted so long? Why is Star Trek so popular? It's just something I think we bring with us as we, since we grew up with it. That I don't know. That will depend on what Toho does after Godzilla vs. Destroyer. That will depend on if the American TriStar film ever gets made. Right now I would have to, if I had to make an educated guess, I would say that we're probably at peak and might be looking at a downswing for a while. My first Godzilla movie was 1976. I saw it in the theater, Godzilla vs. Megalon. My memories of that movie was, who is this silly robot that can grow, never experiencing Ultraman, and even understanding the concept that a humanoid, human-sized figure could grow giant. That was with Jet Jagger. You know, who is this? Why isn't Godzilla in the movie enough? And the other thing was that the feature that they showed with Godzilla vs. Megalon was some obscure prehistoric movie where women were running around topless. There was a scene, I remember that movie more. There were scenes where two women were sacrificed by being stripped naked, tied to a rock, and beaten to death. And I'm sitting there with my little brothers, you know, and I'm sitting there saying, this is what they're showing with a Godzilla film. That's but that was my earliest memory as far as seeing Godzilla in the theater. My earliest memory of Godzilla was probably King Kong vs. Godzilla on the 4:30 movie, or when Channel 7, I think it was, used to show the King Kong Godzilla marathons during Thanksgiving. Now, I think they showed King Kong, Son of Kong, Mighty Joe Young on Thanksgiving Day, and I don't even remember, but they showed 2 or 3 Godzilla films the Friday after. My favorite Godzilla film is Godzilla vs. the Thing. To me, Godzilla looks the most realistic in the film. I like the dubbing in the film is excellent. The pace of the story is excellent. There's just very little fault I can find with Godzilla vs. the Thing. That's of the old series. The new series, it's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. That I like because the pacing in it is fast, but the key element in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla that I like, is the inclusion of Baby. Baby gives a reason for the monsters to react and interact the way they do. It's not a typical Godzilla pops out of the water and decides, I'm going to go lunch on Tokyo today. You know, Baby's found, taken to Tokyo, Godzilla goes after it, wrote it. You know, the Baby actually holds that film together better than probably a lot of them in the series. I would say my favorite score that he wrote is probably the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla score. To me, it's just a very powerful score. I like his new theme for Mechagodzilla. It just works for me. You know, everything that made that movie work for me was probably the music, if nothing more. It's just very powerful music, and that's my favorite score that he's done to date. Toho, and I'm happy they're doing it, should take a break. I think Godzilla has a future if they don't continue making one movie a year. One movie a year in Japan from 1991 just stretched the storyline and the credibility too far. If they give Godzilla a hiatus for a few years and maybe have a new production team come in and do something fresh, I think it has a future. I think it can go another 10, 20 years. I don't know if it'll go another 30, 40 years. Stranger things have happened. As far as in this country, I personally don't know if the American film is going to get made. If something is not done where some of the newer films are not released here, I think it will be a stretch in the long run for people to really appreciate Godzilla as my generation gets older. You know, it's very hard to have the same type of resurgence 10, 15 years from now when the kids of today, the only thing they have to compare it with is, you know, you can take, you know, Mortal Kombat and maybe they can catch Godzilla vs. Megalon on TV or on videotape. Excuse me. And unless they do something to get the newer films here, I can see it probably declining in the next 10 years. The new series of films look technically better. And at least try to take the character in each film more seriously than, let's say, the post-1965 Godzilla films did. But the Honda years, you know, they were unique. I mean, the stories, the Honda years, the films had interesting human stories. You did not seem like the Godzilla films today almost follow the same formula. You could tell where you are in the most recent Godzilla films based on which battle you're watching. You know, it's always have, you know, the monster comes, Godzilla pops up and fights and defeats the monster the first time, finally, and goes home. And that type of formula, it's like, you know, you have a battle, some incidental stuff, and a main battle at the end seems to be the main story structure of all the recent films. You didn't have that in the Honda years. You had more story development. I said up until about 1965, when Toho wanted to start really cranking them out on a production schedule and catering more towards, I guess, the Gamera film type audience, where they were more interested in bringing the children's audience in.